Welcome to Developing an Argument, the fourth of 5 videos in the series Writing Graduate Research Papers, an original creation of the Academic Support and Access Center's Writing Lab at American University. My name is Jordan Grant. This series is designed to help students through the entire process of writing a graduate research paper. In this video, you will learn how to find unanswered questions that your paper can answer, how to refine your questions through an evidentiary review, how to construct an argument to answer your question, and how to organize your argument into an outline. Step 1. Find unanswered questions. By now you've already devoted a serious amount of time to performing a literature review. If you haven't, I highly recommend you press pause and go back to the third video in this series. The literature review is what allows you to understand the scholarly conversation around your research topic. Your research paper is your opportunity to join the scholarly conversation and, like any good conversation, your goal is to both say something new and build on what has been said before. For most students, the easiest way to join the conversation is to find an unanswered question. Your paper, whatever form it eventually takes, will be an argument that tries to answer that question. I should note here that many instructors tell their students to look for problems instead of questions. Personally, I found that the terms can be interchangeable, so for simplicity, I've tailored this video around the concept of questions. That being said, if you prefer to think of your research as an attempt to solve a problem, never fear. The same principles should still apply. Unless you're writing a paper in the hard sciences or mathematics, you won't be able to find a list of unanswered questions that are waiting to be solved. However, that doesn't mean these questions don't exist. As your lit review has shown, every topic is surrounded by a unique scholarly conversation, a body of knowledge created by experts. But while this scholarly conversation can be large, it's not infinite. There are always spaces beside and between the established experts where you can add your own original argument. With that in mind, start your research for unanswered questions by rereading the analysis you made during your literature review. Remember, during your review, you collected sources, processed them, and then wrote your own analysis of your notes. As you reread your analysis, look for places where you could contribute to the existing conversation. Your paper could carry the conversation forward in a number of ways: moving research in a new direction, highlighting a connection other experts have overlooked, or solving an ongoing debate. As you look for questions, you should return to the brainstorming strategies you used when you were still looking for a research topic. Mind mapping, or free writing, might help you stumble across a line of inquiry that your conscious mind missed. Step 2. Refine questions through an evidentiary review. Once you've drafted a few research questions, or even if you feel stuck with a blank page, you may start asking yourself, what makes a research question good? For the students I work with, I have one major criteria. I think a good question for a graduate research paper is doable. What I mean by doable is that a good question is something you can answer given the time and the resources you have available. As you probably know too well, with most graduate research papers, you have a very limited amount of time and a very limited amount of space in which you can answer your question. In most cases, you don't have time to conduct an extensive original study or travel to distant archives. Because of these limitations, specificity is your friend. The more specific and limited your research questions are, the more likely it is that you'll be able to answer them in the space of a semester. This is why refining your questions is such an important step. And while there are many ways to refine your research questions and make them more specific, in my experience, nothing has as much influence as your evidence. Your evidence, your sources, your data, your subjects, and your case studies. These are the raw materials for your paper. Your argument, which we can define as your best answer to the research question, will rest upon your evidence. With that in mind, it's obvious that the evidence you have available will define what research questions you can answer. A hypothetical example may help explain how understanding your evidence can help you refine your research questions. Imagine a student who, at the beginning of the semester, said that she wanted to answer the research question of what caused the American Civil War. Now, as any historian can tell you, this is a question that has been hotly debated for almost 150 years. It is a vast scholarly conversation. Literally thousands of articles and books have been written about it. It's unlikely the student will be able to answer that question in her paper. Fortunately, our student has done her homework, and during her literature review, she realized that her initial question, what caused the Civil War, was too ambitious. She also discovered that the scholarly conversation was riddled with smaller questions that she could potentially answer in a graduate research paper. She decided to pursue the answer of a much smaller question. Why did people fight in the Civil War? This question was a huge improvement, but it still needed to be refined. Our student decided to check and see what sources were available to answer her question. In other words, she decided to look at her evidence. If I was to define this formally, I would say that the student decided to perform an evidentiary review. For many students, it's helpful to think of this as a second literature review, but one that focuses on the available evidence for an argument instead of the scholarly conversation. Like a normal literature review, an evidentiary review usually calls for the 3 steps of collection, processing, and analysis. It's through this 3-step process that you can familiarize yourself with the possible sources for your argument and begin narrowing your question accordingly. During her evidentiary review, our hypothetical student looked very carefully at the resources that were available to her, and she began to refine her question accordingly. She discovered that, while she could not find any sources that explained why Confederate soldiers chose to fight in the American Civil War, she did find sources from soldiers who fought for the Union. Specifically, she found scanned copies of diaries and journals kept by Pennsylvania soldiers who fought for the Union in the Civil War, all of which were available online. Eventually, our student realized that while she could not answer the question, what caused the Civil War, and she also couldn't answer the smaller question of why did people choose to fight in the Civil War, she could definitely answer the question of why did pro-Union men from Pennsylvania choose to fight in the Civil War. In your own work, you will need to go through a similar process with your research questions. Like our hypothetical student, you will need to reflect on the time and the resources you have available and refine your questions accordingly. You'll probably discover that the easiest way to refine your questions is to perform an evidentiary review. Step 3. Construct an argument to answer the question. Once you've found and refined your research questions, you'll need to spend time building your paper's argument. Fortunately, you've already done most of the work. This step is just an opportunity to consolidate all the information you've gathered into one place. When I'm working with graduate students at this stage, I usually have them get out a blank sheet of paper or open a new text file. Then, I ask them to fill out as much information as they can under a series of 7 headings: question, hypothesis, literature review, evidence, methods and theories, analysis, and implications. The first heading is research questions. By this stage, you should know the question or questions your paper will try to answer. Take a few minutes and actually write them down. The second heading is hypothesis. A hypothesis is a proposition. It's your preliminary answer to the research question based on the information you currently have. Seen from another perspective, your hypothesis is a brief statement of what your paper will argue. Some people would call it a thesis. At this point, your hypothesis can be quite short, just a few sentences long. In time, as you get deeper and deeper into the paper, your hypothesis will change, growing in complexity as you become more and more of an expert. The third heading is literature review. As I've said before, literature review has a variety of meanings. In this case, the lit review is a brief statement summarizing the current scholarly conversation surrounding your topic and, more specifically, the conversation that surrounds your research question. But your goal here is to go beyond summary. You also want to explain how your argument will enhance the conversation that's already going on. You want to explain why experts on your topic should care about your research. The fourth heading is evidence. This is where you describe the raw material of your paper, your sources, your data, your subjects, your case studies, the things you will be analyzing in order to answer your research questions. Hopefully, you've already gained some familiarity with your evidence during your evidentiary review. However, you should go beyond describing your evidence here. Do your best to explain why you've chosen these particular sources. How will your sources help you answer the question? And why are they better than the other sources that are out there in the world? The fifth heading is methods and theories. This section varies the most between disciplines. Some like sociology, place an enormous amount of emphasis on methodology, while other disciplines, like literature, pay more attention to theory. Your lit review has probably shown you what experts in your discipline prefer. Regardless, you should try to explain the value of your chosen methodology or theories. How will they help you collect and interpret your evidence? The sixth heading is analysis. Here, you explain what happens when you analyze your evidence using your chosen methods and theories. What does your analysis reveal? The structure of the analysis section is usually defined by the structure of the evidence you've chosen. At this stage, you may not be familiar enough with your evidence to fill in this section with any detail. That's okay. Just put in your best guess as to what you think you will find. The seventh and final heading is implications. This section is a stand-in for your paper's eventual conclusion. It's your chance to explain why your research matters. In other words, if your argument is correct, what will experts need to do differently? Perhaps more importantly, what will the world, or whatever takes place of the world in your study, need to do differently? Filling in these 7 headings, research question, hypothesis, lit review, evidence, methods and theories, analysis, and implications, should give you all the building blocks you need to make a compelling argument. Step 4. Organize the argument into an outline. Many students, particularly in the United States, have had bad experiences with outlines. In too many schools, teachers ask their students to write an outline for their paper before they're ready, before the student knows enough about the topic to choose an interesting question or to construct a compelling argument. Additionally, I know from my own work as a writing counselor that many students discover their paper in the process of writing. For these students, it's not until they reach their paper's conclusion that they realize what they have been trying to say all along. I empathize with these students, but I also know from experience that this practice, discovering a paper at the end of writing it, doesn't work very well in graduate school. Simply put, the length and the complexity of graduate research papers means that writing without a plan is almost sure to lead to frustration and, for many, procrastination. An outline is an amazing resource for a graduate writer, as it provides a roadmap through what can be very tricky terrain. If you've taken the time to fill in the section mentioned in the previous step, creating an outline should be relatively straightforward. You already have all the building blocks you need. All that's left is to put them in order. But what order is best? Since the structure of graduate research papers varies wildly between disciplines, there's no one-size-fits-all order for your outline. Instead, you will have to find the ideal outline for the specific paper that you're writing. First, you will need to learn your genre. A graduate research paper is usually seen as a stepping stone towards a published academic article in your field. Knowing that, you should be consciously trying to imitate the structure of academic papers from your discipline. The best way to learn this structure is to seek out a few recently published articles from a leading journal and then spend some time deconstructing them. Reread these articles, and instead of trying to extract their content, as you did during your lit review, try to understand how the authors organize their argument. What are the paper's major sections? How long is each section relative to the length of the paper? How did the author transition between the different parts of the paper? By studying the work of published scholars, you can quickly learn the standard structure for arguments in your discipline. Your outline can then mimic this structure. Even after you've learned your genre, you may still have questions about how to organize the various parts of your argument. If this is happening to you, I recommend that you follow the advice of the novelist Stephen King. In his book, On Writing, King recommends that aspiring writers seek out what he calls the ideal reader, a person who you can imagine writing your paper for. This person, this ideal reader, can be anyone. All that matters is that you can envision them reading, understanding, and hopefully enjoying the argument you've created. If you're not sure about how to order things in your outline, try to imagine what your ideal reader would prefer. What order would help them understand your argument? Chances are that the organization that works for your ideal reader would also be the best fit for all of your paper's readers. Going through these steps, developing your argument until you have a fully realized outline, will prepare you for the final step in writing a graduate research paper, writing and revising a draft. Thank you for watching Developing an Argument, the 4th video in the series Writing Graduate Research Papers. If you found the video helpful, be sure to check out our other videos, which are available through the Academic Support and Access Center's website. This video is protected by a Creative Commons license.